All right, good evening, everybody. It's another night, and hopefully tonight we will be able to get a little bit started in regarding to getting AC input power to our inverters. I know that I'm not going to have all the cabling tonight. It's probably going to end up being a multi-night project. I know I need to get some more wire from the store, but I should have enough to actually get wired from the two inverters to my box over here, which is going to be my junction box. And I'll show you a little bit about how things have changed from that standpoint. But yeah, having had the battery run down a couple of days ago, and all this week it's really been crummy weather. I might have gotten maybe 3 kilowatts a day, but due to the inverter inefficiencies and everything, not a whole lot of that. A couple percent actually went into the battery. And then the closer you got, you know, when you were at the extremes of the sunny part of the day, so at the very beginning of the sunny part of the day and the end of the sunny part of the day, you were expending more power coming out of your battery trying to keep your MPPTs up and running. So I don't really know that it bought me all that much. What I've been doing, at least the past 2 days, is once I start noticing that I got more power coming out of the batteries than going into it, I just turn off the breakers from the solar panels and shut everything down. So normally 9:30 in the morning I'll turn them on, and close to 5 o'clock at night I'll turn them off. Outside of that, I'm wasting power instead of gaining it. So that kind of showed me with those nasty days that we've been having, kind of showed me the need that I had to make sure that I got the grid lines hooked up, so that when the batteries got to a certain state of charge, the inverters would just switch back over to the grid and utilize the grid power. Now I still have to get another array set up and then get some frames built for my last set of 100-watt panels. So that would give me another 1,200 watts coming in, optimal days, obviously. But it's better than nothing. And the more that I can get coming from the sun versus the grid just helps save me money in the long run. So tonight, let's see if we can at least get the lines run from here and here over to the junction box. The excess line that I had from running up and over to take over the breaker panel was not enough to reach the box behind the camera for my grid line, but it should be plenty long enough to come from the inverters down through the trough and over to the junction box. So I did get this box mounted. If you've been watching any of my previous videos, this is not the original box that I was going to put here. I was going to put an AC disconnect here, but after spending probably an hour tonight just looking things over and trying to decide how to make it all work, there wasn't enough room in the 60 amp disconnect for multiple sets of lines. And what I mean by that is the inverters each take 120 volts, which means each inverter needs a ground, a hot, and a neutral. And those 6 wires would not all fit inside the 60 amp disconnect. So in here, I'll have a little bit more room. There's a lot of extra breakers in here. I just put them in there just to keep it's some kind of grease on the bus bar terminals. Is it dielectric grease? I don't know. But I just wanted to keep the dust and stuff out of that grease. So I just searched through a ton of breakers that I had and snapped them all in place just to keep the dust off that grease while I was doing drilling. But I also ran my conduit up and over to the other box. You know, I didn't put the final bends in everything just because I want to be able to easily pull the wire through it. But like I said a minute ago, The extra line that I had was not long enough to go up and over to the other panel, so it should be plenty long enough to make my connections in here, and I plan on having everything set up the exact same way. So the inverter on the left is going to be a phase 1 line, and the inverter on the right is going to be a phase 2 line, all 4 gauge, 6 gauge ground, 4 gauge neutral, coming in here. And then I'll have that 60 amp disconnect to be able to disconnect everything on this wall for the inverters. And the only thing that's really changed in this entire project that I have to pick up additionally, because I knew I was going to need more 4 gauge line, but it just, because I changed this from the 60 amp disconnect to this small breaker panel, is I just have to get another 60 amp breaker to go over here. And some of you might be thinking, well, why are you doing all this? You could just disconnect everything over here instead of bringing it all over here. Well, I want to make it easy in the event that I'm not home. I will have a little shutdown cheat sheet and startup cheat sheet over here. But having everything over here just makes things easier. And plus, down the road, if I end up taking over this box over here, I can still have a separate shutoff if I have to run this over to my main panel. Now, keep in mind, I'm not an electrician. I have picked the brains of an electrician just to walk through some of my process here, but don't follow what I'm doing. Talk to an expert. I know enough just to be dangerous when it comes to this stuff. So let's get wiring and hopefully wrap up the last time that I have to pull these faceplates off these inverters for a while. In fact, while I'm in here, I don't know if you've noticed it or not, but I do have another breaker down here for a solar line. I should probably run my wire up in and terminate it into one of these PV inputs, PV2s, over here or over here. I haven't figured out which one I want to do, but one of the two. I should probably run that now while I've got it all opened up. So that should be a very easy task. And we might end up seeing Ian at some point tonight. He's finishing up his instruments right now. He's got to do some homework still, but I know he wants to come down and help. So let's get started. Get some wiring done. Well, that's going to make for a short night. I was hoping that my ground and neutral were longer than this, but they're not. So I don't have enough ground and neutral to be able to run over and complete the connection to the first inverter. So I will have to add that into what I need to order and pick up for wire. So that's going to be another, I don't know, 5 feet. So I'm thinking if I get an extra 5 feet of the ground and the neutral line, that'll be, 20 feet of the red, 20 feet of the black, and then 25 ground and 25 neutral. I'll get some more measurements here before I order, but I guess for right now I can put that PV line in. least make it so that I don't have to get into this inverter when I work on the PV lines again. Well, for the time being, this looks like all I'm going to be able to get done tonight. So we've got our phase 2 panel, AC input line run down through the trough or wireway, and it comes out the end of the conduit over there. We've got our line for our phase 1 panel coming down, going into the trough, and coming out over there. But we don't have enough wire for our neutral or our ground to be able to get to the junction box panel over here. We did get the PV2 line run and over to this new breaker right here. And I try to color code my lines so that I know which one's going to what. So green is for my ground array, blue is for my roof array, and then black will probably just be, I might end up doing black and green to know that it's my second ground array. We'll see. But tomorrow it looks like I need to run to the store and pick up some more line to go from my box over here, up over the ceiling to this panel over here. And then obviously I need to make room in this panel for my line coming to that junction box. All for my AC input to my inverters, so that when my inverter's battery gets too low, the grid line will take over and supply power directly from the grid. Hopefully minimal times that happens, but we'll pick this back up tomorrow, hopefully finishing our AC input lines. Have a good night, and we'll catch up with you all tomorrow. Well, my wire showed up this morning. I ordered it on eBay from a store that I've used in the past, and I highly recommend using them. This probably is not going to show up that well on screen, but it is AC/DC wire and supply. I'll try to include a link to their store. I found their shipping is really fast. They work very hard to make sure that you get what you need, and the pricing is much better than I've been able to find in the normal box stores. So I ended up ordering some 10 gauge line for my solar arrays, and had I actually stopped and thought about it, I really didn't need 10 gauge, but my mind was on 10 gauge from when I ran the conduit from the barn. So, oh well, we'll use it. And I didn't even realize it, but apparently I also ordered a 10 gauge 50 foot of green. So I'm sure I'll be able to repurpose that for something as well. And then I got 6 gauge 25 foot from my ground connection, 25 black, red, and white of my 4 gauge for the AC line, coming from my panel to supply grid power to my inverters. So hopefully, I know we've got special meetings at our church tonight, so I'm going to try and see if I can get this wired up, or at least close to being wired up, before we head to those meetings. It should be fairly simple, at least getting the wire pulled. I might be able to do that on my lunch break today. But the wire should easily feed up through the conduit and over and down. And 25 foot should be plenty for that. The conduit run itself is 20 foot right now. So I got an extra 5 foot just for playroom and for the line from this phase 1 inverter over to the box as well. So hopefully by the end of the night tonight, we should have grid power to these inverters. All right, we got our wires all bundled together. We're gonna see if we can feed them through without having to run the jet line and the rabbit through the conduit. But this time we've got what, we got 3 turns that we gotta contend with. One over top of that trunk, one turning perpendicular to those joists, and then one coming straight down next to the panel. So let's see if we can get it through with minimal frustration and grief. So we got our line right here. I'm gonna end up removing these 2 breakers. So the line is gonna end up coming straight in. Neutral will come up here. Ground will end up being the longest, having to come over to here. And then right now, it almost looks like ground's gonna end up being the longest in this one too, coming down to this. So cross your fingers. I know I'm doing a lot of praying right now, hoping that this reaches. So I really don't wanna have to buy another 5 foot of cable. Looks like it would end up being neutral and ground. Guess if I needed to, I can always take my excess black and tape it white and tape it green. So it's gonna be easiest to get this side done first, since there's no power or anything over here that I need to worry about. Got that side done. Didn't take too long. Now over here I've got, oh, I don't know, maybe six feet outside of the conduit, maybe. And again, my longest line in here is going to be coming over to my ground bar. I might have to get creative with my grounding cable and tape it all green, or at least put a nice big old green stripe down it. We'll see. So if you look at this panel, it's all full right now. I'm gonna be popping these 2 circuits out. The bottom one is my boiler circuit, which I'm gonna run over to my off-grid panel. This one is the garbage disposal circuit, which I will also run over to my off-grid panel. But for the time being, that will be disconnected, so I have to tell the missus, don't use the garbage disposal. All right, looks like lunchtime's over. To be continued. All right, we're gonna switch gears on wiring a little bit. I'll definitely wanna shut this thing down. but I don't want to do that when my wife's trying to make dinner, and the stove and the water heater and well and all that stuff's on this panel. So switching over to here, I did move this conduit inside here and got these wires put up in here. We're gonna see if the ground wire, I don't know if you can see it right there, that one might barely reach up inside this inverter. So I'm gonna try and get this side wired up quickly before we go to dinner. I heated this conduit up and fought with getting it locked up in here, and it actually bit me. And aside from ow, the first thing that came to my mind was that old video, Charlie Bit Me. I was hoping to not have to do this because this wire is much thicker than the other ground wire. So we'll give an extra foot. Cut that. Just take the lazy man's way of coloring the line. That wiring done in there until I get my blanks to go in the panel. We're just gonna slap these breakers in here for now, but we've got the wiring coming down into the trough up in this first conduit here, and then over here coming up into this first conduit as well. So all that's left is putting these three in a double breaker right here. We'll probably do later on this evening when I get back, so that I can just completely turn off this panel here. Not bad for 540. All right, I'll be back in a little bit. All right, time to shut things down. Let's turn on some extra light because we're gonna need it, because this light's gonna go out. All right. Good. Yeah, so that's still hot up there. But down here, we are good. Not the prettiest job in the world because it's coming in so tight. Put a loop down, phase 1, phase 2, neutral, and then the ground comes up over to here. Power's back on, so let's check and make sure breaker works the way it's supposed to. Nothing. Okay, we'll come over here, double check and make sure everything looks good over here. Phase 2, phase 1. Phase 1 comes up to phase 1, phase 2 goes to phase 2, neutral. Ground comes down here, and grounds go out. Phase 1, phase 2. And again, these are only in place for now, just because there's already the face plates punched out. So I'll put blanks in place. Realistically, I could just put other circuits over here for the grid, but I'm not going to. I want this to only be the disconnect, the grid disconnect for the solar setup. Cross your fingers, it's wired right. It's not gonna go boom. Power on. 248. See if I can do this where you can see hot and hot. 248. Phase 1 and neutral. 124.4. Phase 2 and neutral. And my thing turned off. On 24/7. On 24, hot to ground. 124, hot to ground. All right. Before we flip this breaker, we're gonna walk over and we're gonna look at our phase 1 inverter from left to right, line, neutral, ground. And we can verify by looking at the label right there, line, neutral, ground. Inverter 2, line, neutral, ground from left to right. And again, line, neutral, ground. Come back, we look, phase 1, phase 2, neutral, neutral, tied up here, ground, ground, tied down here. I know I'm going over this a lot, but better safe than sorry. I'd rather double, triple, and quadruple check before any accidents or oopses happen. All right. As soon as I flipped that switch, the inverter's kicked on, which with no face plates, I don't know what they're doing, but let's check. $123.56. $123.4.5. Looks good. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna come over to our main disconnect. We're gonna turn this off. And we're gonna start buttoning things up. All right, without buttoning up the trough, because I still want to do some cable management in there. You can see some of these. What I was hoping would work, it's not going to work because they just get pulled off the inside. But at least taping them up or zip tying them together will help keep the bundle together. But let's Batteries are already on. Solar. There is no solar because it's 10 o'clock at night. Let's do this one first. Inverter 1, inverter 2. Counting down. Listen for the click. And there's the click. 120 volts on phase 2. 120 volts on phase 1. AC input is nothing. Same on this one. Now we'll come over here to our AC input. Turn that on. Phase 1, 123, and there's our grid line. 123 and our grid line. And the reason the displays turn off is because I programmed them to turn off because I don't want them on all the time. So most of the time by default they'll stay on all the time. It's just another battery drain. I mean, it might even be it might be nil, but it's still a battery drain to me. If I don't need to see it, turn off the backlight. All right. We'll come over here and turn that output back on. Turn on the light here. Disconnect. And reconnect. There we go. We are back on solar power. 21:59 Monday night. We finally have our solar backup power. So the grid power will be our backup to the solar power, and we're going to run primarily on solar as long as we can, and then I'm going to go through and program the voltage so that when the voltage drops to a certain percentage, it will automatically switch back over to grid power. I'll do another video simulating that test so we can see what the timing is. As far as I know, it's supposed to be milliseconds, to where your clock shouldn't reset, your computer shouldn't turn off, but we're going to go through and test that. I might program a higher switch voltage at first, and then run a few heavy loads just to get down to that voltage so we can actually physically watch the switch. The 4-gauge wire again was a pain in the butt. Just trying to bend it in some of those short distances, the short curves and stuff like that, just was very difficult. I know some people use the 6-gauge wire, and even the rating for 6-gauge I believe is 55 amps. So that's literally right at the top of what these inverters could do. The output is like 54 and change, I believe, but I'd rather have that buffer just in case, so I ran 4-gauge for everything, which is 70 amps, I believe. Plenty of flex room. So today we ran the wire through the conduit over to the panel behind the camera. We got it all hooked in. There are 2 circuits that I pulled out of that panel that I do need to tap into this panel here, and those 2 circuits are my boiler circuit and my garbage disposal. So I have already informed my wife the garbage disposal is disconnected right now. I will hook it back up tomorrow night. It should be very simple. I'm pretty sure I've got plenty of 12-gauge line that I can easily run over and drop down right through the top. And I've got plenty of breakers floating around. I'll even might even reuse the breakers that I pulled out of the old panel. But I'm happy. I think my wife is going to be happy, because switching back and forth between solar and grid is a pain. If you know you have to do it, that's fine, but since I already have the grid line there, I might as well utilize it. My entire point for putting all this stuff in is to be able to reduce my cost and save some money off of my utility bills. So the grid, for all intents and purposes, is going to be my backup for those cloudy days, for those rainy days, extended days. We are still running a test to see how long these will run before the voltage drops too low, and now they would just switch back to grid. But I want to see how that's going to work. I believe before I started doing the work this evening, we were at like 69%, 70%. I'll have to go back and look at the SolarAssistant to see. But a successful night. I have to look and see what is going to be coming up next. I know, like I said, we're still running the test to see how long things are going to last. I still have my box to mount for my array for outside, which you saw earlier, the cable that I got today. So I'll be running that and hooking up. I'll either be hooking up another array or splitting my larger array on the ground in two. If I split the one in two, that's going to help me a lot with shadows from the trees, because when I look at SolarAssistant, I got this nice big bell curve around 12:30 in the afternoon, and then around 1 it dips down a little bit and then comes back up, and that dip down is where I have a significant amount of shading coming across right along the middle section of my array on the ground. So I still have to decide if I'm going to split that first or if I'm going to add the other panels first. I'm probably just going to split it first. It's going to be easier. And then I still need to build the frames for the other array. And then I need to go through and do a full walkthrough of everything, an overview of SolarAssistant. So lots still to come. Lots for me to just do a data dump so that I remember these things. A few observations just on how I see things are running and oddities that I might make note of. So, all right, I'm gonna wrap it tonight. It's a few minutes after 10 o'clock. Y'all have a good night. We'll catch up with you later.